Welcome to That Florida Feeling. How's everybody doing? It's cold. I don't like it. I moved to Florida to be warm. I'm pretty sure everybody else did too, and it's cold. I think this is the third or fourth day I've had a freeze warning or a frost warning or something like that issued, and I don't own clothes for this. I don't even own socks heavy enough for this. But this is the 2 weeks that winter comes to Florida, so here we are and dealing with it and complaining about it like usual. I hope that you guys have had a good 2025 so far. If you haven't checked out Unfiltered Studios, I definitely encourage you to. There are some great people over there doing great things. Amazing podcasts. Kind of pretty much topics for everybody. Thanks for checking out last week's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed learning about Bum Farto. I know, interesting name, interesting character. Thanks to everybody who has checked out the social media pages. The TikTok is doing well. The Facebook is just, I love the memes. I love it when you guys post them. Thank you so much. YouTube is still a bunch of shorts, so thanks for sticking with me on that one. Still learning it, still trying to get it. At least I finally got the podcast posted on that, so I'm excited about that. And Florida is still Florida. Florida man is Florida manning everywhere. But I appreciate it. Oh, and thanks for anybody who follows me on Instagram. If you catch my random polls, I appreciate the people who join in those. I think we all decided to tell what temperature it was the other day, as it is cold and we don't like it. But today we're going to talk about a small town in Central Florida that I think is often overlooked, but it is home to something magical. No, I'm not talking about Orlando. Orlando is definitely not overlooked. And I'm not talking about anything related to Disney. Pretty sure everybody knows most things related to Disney, and this has neither of them, but it's actually not too far from Orlando or Disney. I'm actually talking about Lake Wales, and Lake Wales is home to Bok Tower and Gardens, among a few other things. The town of Lake Wales is in good old Polk County, or for those of you who aren't completely southern, that would be Polk County, in Central Florida, and it is part of the Lakeland Winter Haven area. In fact, it's just a little bit south of Winter Haven, not that far. A survey by W.A. Williams and J. Jackson, deputy surveyors of the state of Florida, was the people who decided to make this a region around present-day Lake Wales. The area was actually considered to be uninhabitable by early settlers. Having lived in that area, I can see why. There are literally lakes, swamps, and some kind of body of water everywhere. And it's funny because the Spanish actually said the same thing about that area almost 300 years earlier. The Spanish actually disregarded Florida for a lot of reasons, considering that a lot of it was uninhabitable. But by 1879, people were a little more adventurous, and the land around the present city was surveyed again by Sidney Irving Wales. It looks like Wales, but it's Wailes, so I may not be saying it right. He was an agent for the Florida Land and Improvement Company, who changed the name of the lake. It was known as Watts Lake. He changed it to Lake Wales because, you got to name things after yourself. And that's how it became Lake Wales. And in 1902, G.V. Tillman scouted the region of Lake Wales again and saw the potential for turpentine, citrus, and other industries in the area, which is funny because that's kind of what it's known for now. He actually developed the area and decided to settle the area around Lake Wales. The city of Lake Wales was actually established near this lake of the same name. The city was established in 1911-1912 and planned by the Lake Wales Land Company. The spelling Wales is actually used for the city, how it's spelled today, although the lake is actually generally still spelled with an I. Alan Carlton Neidegger, a civil engineer, was actually contracted by the Lake Wales Land Company to plot out the community of Lake Wales. He and his crew camped out on the shores of Crystal Lake. I have so many things I could say on that, and spent months plotting out the new community. Unfortunately, or not that we know of, there were no deaths reported from Jason, but of course those could have been lost with time, or they just didn't want to talk about it, as it could have been very traumatic. Sorry, I had to. I'm such a huge horror fan. Come on, it's Crystal Lake. Okay, anyways. But this is actually an excerpt that was taken from one of the men who was a crew to kind of tell you what they dealt with when they were plotting out the area around Lake Wales. So this is an excerpt from Rose Wetmore's diary, and this would have been in autumn. Nobody uses autumn anymore, so fall of 1912. It was a foggy morning, having been a rainy fall. The water was up to both sides of the railroad in many places, causing us to almost regret having come to Florida. He's in the rainy season, sorry. But just before coming to Lake Wales, the sun came out in all its glory and banished our idea of being in a swamp, as we expected snakes and alligators to be running around like chickens, and of course found that to be a great mistake. The train stopped at the platform north of a little station used to load and unload barrels of turpentine from the still. Where they unloaded our trunks before we could get off, there were no sidewalks, no lights, or hard roads, just deep sand everywhere with hogs and cattle roaming all over. But when I stepped from the car door and saw how beautiful the view was over the two lakes and the big moss-draped pines and oaks and a church under construction, I was content. I wonder if that was the first snowbird. No. So that was one of the people who very first came to Lake Wales, to the area. So, the beauty of Florida has always been there, and the people who were plotting Lake Wales were no exception to that. Now, the city of Lake Wales was officially incorporated as a town in May of 1917. And of course, Florida had a land boom just not far behind the founding of Lake Wales. Actually, in 1925, the Atlantic Coast Railroad built a new line from Haines City that joined lines with Everglades City. And a depot was actually opened in Lake Wales in 1928, which actually brought more people and more opportunities to this area. The town had continued to grow and change as time goes on. Lake Wales has grown a little bit since the first days. I mean, they're not a huge city by any means. They have adapted to the ever-growing population in Florida, as Polk County is one of the fastest-growing counties in Florida. A lot of Central Florida actually is. Lake Wales is, however, still a pretty small community. The town does have a small private airport. They are just south of Winter Haven, so Legoland is not far up the street. The town is also home to the Lake Wales. I wrote that wrong. Lake Wales Ridge Wildlife and Environmental Area. The environmental area is protected habitat for Florida scrub jays. The area is accessible for visit, and it is pretty much mainly untouched. So you can pretty much see many different kinds of wildlife, flora, fauna, trees in the area. It's really nice if you like to do photography or just take in wildlife or migratory birds. It's really, really cool for nature lovers. Lake Wales actually has some really cool areas around, some parks, but Lake Wales is also home to Spook Hill. A lot of people talk about Spook Hill around Spooky Month. So it's a popular place to visit during Spooky Month or October, as the hill has a weird phenomenon. The legend says if you place your car in neutral at the bottom of the hill, you'll roll up the hill. They've actually got it marked where there's a white line and a thing over it that says Spook Hill. And if you pull up to the white line and you place your car in neutral, it will in fact roll. It's actually a optical illusion, but your car does roll. But it's an optical illusion. But nonetheless, it's still fun to visit. Did have to see that myself. Did not put my car in neutral. But it's a very interesting thing to see. There's a cute little sign and a ghost. But nonetheless, something that Lake Wales is known for, especially in October. But as I said earlier, Lake Wales is definitely known for Bok Tower. Bok Tower is an amazingly beautiful place. Bok Tower is one of my favorite places in Central Florida. Bok Tower and Gardens is a beautiful 250-acre garden and bird sanctuary that sits atop one of the few and maybe only not even real, mountains in Florida, Iron Mountain. I think that we have like 3 hills named mountains in Florida. Iron Mountain is one of them, and Bok Tower sits atop of it. I can attest that you actually do go up a rise when you go to Bok Tower, and when you look out from Bok Tower, you actually are looking down over parts of Florida. I'll post the picture. It's a beautiful, actually really gorgeous view. Edward Bok in the 1920s decided to purchase this and create Bok Tower and Gardens, formerly known as Bok Mountain Lake Sanctuary and Singing Tower. The gardens attractions including a singing tower and its 60 bell carillon, the Bok Exedra, and Pinewood Estates, now known as El Retiro. The Pine Ridge Trail and its visitor center. It's a beautiful, beautiful place, and it basically takes an entire day. The Bok Tower and Gardens is a national historical landmark. The 205-foot Singing Tower was built upon one of the highest points in Peninsular Florida, estimated to be around 295 feet above sea level, which is astonishing for Florida. And it's listed on, of course, the National Register of Historic Places. The national significance of the gardens and its tower came from its association with Edward W. Bok and his team of engineers and designers. Adjacent Pinewood Estates is also separately listed on the National Register as El Retiro. So both places have equally important places on the list. Edward William Bok was actually, in his own right, pretty famous. He is the editor of Ladies' Home Journal, and his wife, Mary Louise Curtis Bok, they were some of the original snowbirds as well. They spent the winter of 1921 in Florida near the Lake Wales Ridge. After he retired, he was tired of being an editor, and they wanted to come to Florida and somehow found Central Florida. I will never understand how sometimes people find these little small towns in Central Florida, but they did. The Boks fell in love with the beauty of the area, and they created a 25-acre bird sanctuary on the ridge's highest hill to protect the land from being developed, hence Iron Mountain and the bird sanctuary and how it started. They actually commissioned landscape architecture Fred Law Olmsted Jr. to transform what was then an arid sand hill. And if you've ever been to Bok Tower, you know as you're driving down it, it literally is a sand hill, into a spot of beauty second to none in the country. The first year was basically spent digging trenches, laying out pipes. Then they put soil on top, which was brought in by just truckloads and truckloads. And then they began to plant. And they planted a lot. They planted 1,000 live oaks, 10,000 azaleas, over 100 sable palms, well over 300 magnolias, 500 of one kind of plant that I can't pronounce, hundreds of fruit shrubs, blueberries and hollies. And they even tried to introduce flamingos to the sanctuary a couple times, which is why sometimes you actually see pictures of the tower with flamingos, the reflection pool, and not swans. Flamingos really don't survive in cooler weather, really outside of South Florida. And Central Florida was not a good home for flamingos. They either didn't survive the cold weather or they were killed by other animals. So they didn't make it. Nightingales brought from England also did not do well because it's also a little too cold in Central Florida, which is really strange if they're from England. But anyways, they didn't do well either. Now, the actual garden you see now is obviously probably easily 10 times the size of the original garden, and features ferns, palms, oaks, pines, wetland plants, you name it. It's probably got many different more plants than was originally intended. The plantings also include camellias, tree ferns, creeping figs, and Dahoon holly. Let's see, spider lilies, wax myrtles, date and sable palms, papyrus, philodendron, and horsetail rush, just to name a few of some of the plants that you will find in the gardens. The site is also a refuge for more than 100 bird species. You'll find wild turkeys and groups of sandhill cranes wandering the grounds. Sandhill cranes are creepy. That's all I'm going to say. Now, in 1905, Bok had decided to replace some of the birds' sanctuary water towers with a stone, water, and bell tower. He hired architect Milton B. Medary to design what he would call the most beautiful water tower in the world, or the most beautiful tower, which he did, and it is amazing. Looks like something straight out of Rapunzel. The 60 bell carillon occupies only the top of the singing tower, the actual top. Some of the rest of the contain large water tanks to irrigate the gardens, and then Bok's baronial study at the base. The 15-foot wide moat surrounding the tower's base is actually koi pond, which still gives it an amazing look. The Gothic Revival Tower, so it was built in a Gothic Revival style, was built at the highest elevation of the site, south of the reflecting pool, so that you can actually see its full image when looking in the pool, which I think is pretty neat that they would have thought of that. The tower is 51 feet square at its base, and changing it to the height of 150 feet to an octagon, which each of its 8 sides at 37 feet wide. Someone really thought a lot of this. It is actually built of pink Etowah marble and gray Creole marble, mined in Tate, Georgia, and then it's got coquina stone out of St. Augustine. The architecture assembled a team of top artisans in their field. He also used an Art Deco architectural sculpture, was designed and executed by Lee Lowry, and depicts Florida flora and fauna. He also used a metal worker by the name of Samuel Yellen to design and execute the iron interior staircase and the iron gates and the 2 bridges over the moat. The Great Brass Door, which features 30 scenes from the Book of Genesis. J.H. Dulles Allen designed and executed the ceramic mosaics, which include 8 35-foot tall grills at the top of the tower. Horace H. Burrell and Sons of Philadelphia were contracted for the actual tower themselves. The construction began in 1927, was completed 2 years later. Outgoing President Calvin Coolidge actually dedicated the tower himself on February 1st in 1929. So, I mean, this was a pretty big deal, not to mention a beautiful, beautiful deal. The American Institute of Architects actually awarded the architect its 1929 gold medal for his Mountain Lake Sanctuary and Singing Tower. Unfortunately, he died 6 months after the tower's dedication. But at least he got to see it completed. He got to see how beautiful it looked. But it does suck that he didn't really go on to get much more accolades because of it. And Bach actually wrote a tower about the planning and construction, and he titled it America's Taj Mahal. Unfortunately, Mr. Bach also did not go on to live to really enjoy his tower. He died on January 9th, 1930, and was interred before the tower's Great Brass Door. So he's actually next to the tower. The tower's 60-bell carillon was actually cast by John Taylor and Company out of England. The bells chamber is on the 8th floor of the tower, just below its playing room that houses a cleaver or a keyboard that controls the bells. The bells are stationary. Only the clappers that move to sound them actually move. The 6th floor is the studio for the carillioner who actually plays them, and recitals are actually given daily, which I've heard one, and it is beautiful. The tower's interior is usually not open to the public. The first floor was Mr. Bach's study. It's now called the Founder's Room. The second floor houses a research and center archives, Chow Research and Center Archives, a collection of institutional records related to the actual tower. The third floor, which contains now empty water tanks that showed off how it would have looked. The fourth floor is a workroom. The fifth floor houses Anton Bree's Carillon Library, which is actually the largest library of Carillon music in the world. And the rest is related to actually playing the bells. Now, in appreciation for Mr. Bach's extraordinary gift to the gardens and towers, a group of his neighbors from Mountain Lake, Florida, commissioned an Excedra, which is a curving bench, in his honor in 1930. And it was used out of the same pink and gray marble as the Singing Tower. It was installed north of the tower, and it sits right outside of it. It's very beautiful. In 2022, the Bach Tower Gardens received a matching grant of $500,000 from Save America's Treasure Program. And while much of it was actually for landscaping restoration, a portion was to be used to conserve the Excedra water fountain, so the area around the curving bench. Now, that's not the only thing on the property. We've talked about the tower, we've talked about the gardens, we've talked about the ponds, but now we've got to talk about the Pinewood Estate, or El Retiro. And it actually sits just adjacent to the gardens. The Pinewood Estate actually is its own 8 acres of the gardens itself, and it features a 20-room Mediterranean revival mansion. So nothing to laugh at. It was actually built between 1930 and 1932 as a winter residence by C. Austin Buck, who was vice president of the Bethlehem Steel Company out of Pennsylvania. The mansion's actual former name was El Retiro, and has actually been restored to its 1930s appearance and given its former name back. El Retiro is one name used for the estate as of 2023. I almost said last year. That would have been wrong. Box Tower and Garden actually hosts events at the mansion throughout the year. The estate was entered onto the National Register of Historic Places as of 1985, and you can see tours daily. The Pine Ridge Nature Preserve and Trail is also on the lands, and it is an ecosystem that has longleaf pines and sandhill habitats, as well as a dense ground that covers biperennial grasses that include a nature trail by the window, by the pond, and extends for 3/4 of a mile and ends at the visitor center. It's not a long trail, but it does give you a look at a different habitat in Florida. It is actually located at one of the highest points of Florida at almost 300 feet above sea level. Shocking for Florida. So they think a long time ago the Lake Wales Ridge was actually a chain of islands, and plants and animals found on the ridge are unique because they evolved on these islands, which is why most of the rare plants and animals can be found in this area. So this is why it's a unique habitat that you get to look at through this, 3/4 of a mile trail. The Pine Ridge is home to several endangered animals, such as the gopher tortoise, the eastern indigo snake, gopher frogs, and the Florida mouse. Conservation efforts for the Pine Trail by the Box Tower and Gardens, including restoration of the native plants and regulation of the invasive species. And they also like to educate the public on the fact that there is this habitat in Florida. And of course, the trails are a great way to see the area, the wildlife, and see the tower as you walk around. Of course, there's a visitor center. The visitor center was actually built in 1997, completed at a cost of almost $2 million. They expanded it in 2019. The Ting Sung and Wei Fong Chow exhibit hall houses a redesigned exhibition showcasing the landmark's history, architecture, and surrounding wildlife and ecology was part of that expansion in 2019. An information desk, orientation film, local arts, exhibit space, and administration offices are all located in the visitor center today. A separate building attached to the visitor center, you can walk through a covered walkway and a promenade, are the gift shop and the Blue Palmetto Cafe. The Singing Tower itself houses collections of documents of history and growth in the gardens and its buildings, along with the Pinewood Estates. While the collections are closed to the public, selections of the archives can actually be displayed in the visitor center. The Pinewood Estate also houses its own collection of ceramics, furniture, and other items that were in the house prior to the tower. You can also see this on its daily tours. Of course, throughout the year, numerous events are designed to draw visitors to the gardens. They vary from year to year. A lot of them have concerts, including jazz and orchestral music, daily playing of the bells. Most popular are the semi-annual symphony concerts given in the fall and spring. Partially because they draw visitors to the large field in front of the tower for an outdoor picnic and music from both an orchestra and a carillon. We went to something similar. We actually went to an Easter sunrise service. 2017, 2018. And it was amazing. We were able to sit out on the same lawn, look over the hill, look over the thing, got to see the tower, got to see the gardens. We were able to hear the bells and wander through after the service, hear the preaching from one of the balconies, and see the sunrise up over Iron Mountain. The tower does hold many events. They're all amazing and all well done. This is one of those places that I think is an amazing experience. I do recommend it. I do recommend making a whole day of it. Don't miss the trails. It's a beautiful sight. Don't miss taking your time walking through the gardens and seeing the flora and the fauna and the random sandhill cranes and really just being out in Florida nature while feeling in such a magical place that someone took the time to not only develop, but to save and to make better. Now, of course, it's close to Lakeland or Winter Haven, so there's plenty of things to do in both of those towns or to stay. If you really want to stay in Lake Wales, you can actually stay at a really cool, unique place called Camp Mac. Camp Mac is a lodge, marina, and I would say an RV resort probably. But it's really cool because there's actually a fishing lodge, and it sits on the chain of lakes, the Kissimmee chain of lakes. And basically it's like a big campground. Like they have cabins, they have a lodge you can stay in, but it's all basically outdoors. They have trails, they have horse trails, and it sits right across the street from Lake Kissimmee State Park. So there's plenty to do, especially if you want to visit a Florida state park. But they also have a really cool airboat tour that actually leaves from this camp, from the docks. And it's actually a Guy Harvey Lodge. So, it's a little touristy. It's going to have some decent food. It's going to have a decent place to stay. You can rent pontoon boats. You go fishing. There's, a place to swim. It's pet friendly. So, if you want to stay something more in Lake Wales, there's some decent places to pick. Now it is a small town. Lake Wales is a small town. I'm not gonna lie to you, but it kind of does have something. If you want to look for something to get away and see nature and see historical and feel old Florida, then definitely check out Lake Wales. It's worth a day trip. It is good old Polk County. It is going to be full of Florida man though. I'm not going to lie to you. And especially today's Florida man, because today's Florida man does come from good old Polk County. Florida man claims he blacked out on meth and PCP while trying to carjack someone. Yeah. Florida man attempted to carjack a contractor around 4:20 p.m. with a gun, but the man got away and called 911. The man didn't get into the car because the car was locked and the victim had already left. So, yeah, didn't get the car. The carjacker then just kind of gave up, walked away. But the police caught up with him at an intersection in Wyanetta. The man then ran into the woods because why not? But then K9 Deputy Ketchum was on the trail and quickly caught up with the man. The man was identified as the carjacker, but the man claims that he didn't know he was doing it because he blacked out because that earlier that day he had taken both PCP and meth because one wasn't good enough. I think the best part of this story, though, guys, is that the dog's name is Ketchum, and he needs his own Pokeball. Yeah, don't do drugs, y'all. Don't. It's not going to be a good thing. Although, speaking of drugs, I did see that Florida just passed had a groundbreaking law, or not law, but ruling passed. Cops now can't stop people in Florida based on the fact that a dog using a canine sniffing because if they smell marijuana, because a dog can't tell the difference between medical marijuana and regular marijuana. I mean, yeah, okay, so like that's actually kind of cool. I'm gonna say, yeah, okay, that's cool. Although now I feel like they're just gonna make them different scents, but I think that's really cool. That is kind of groundbreaking that you now can't use that as a justification to search a car because a dog can't tell the difference. So I'm going to give it to this one on Florida. So that's kind of cool. But I hope you guys have a great week. If you're in Florida, probably stay warm. If you're in the rest of the country, stay warm because I hear snow's coming for y'all. I hope you guys have enjoyed learning about Lake Wales or finding a new place to visit. Be nice, guys. There's plenty of assholes in the world. Don't join them. Wear your sunscreen. Drink your water. And as always, guys, that's your daily dose of sunshine.
This podcast is a production of Unfiltered Studios. If you would like to know more about joining Unfiltered Studios, please visit our website at unfpod.com for more information.